Hey, welcome to the Living Grounded podcast, where each week we sit down with guests from all walks of life to explore stories, experiences, and faith journeys. Together, we have deep and honest conversations about purpose and challenges and what it means to live out the truth of the gospel. So, thanks for joining us. Let's get started. In today's episode, Lead Like You Mean It, we're unpacking what true leadership looks like in a culture that's constantly shifting. What does it mean to motivate people towards something bigger than themselves, even when it's hard? We're talking about the value of failure. Yeah, failure, and why some of the strongest leaders see disappointment not as a roadblock, but as fuel. We'll explore servant leadership, the difference between leading a church, leading a business, and the core qualities that matter most in leaders today. And of course, we'll reflect on mentors, those who shape us and challenged us and showed us what real leadership looks like. So my guest today is Doug Smith. So excited to talk to Doug. He leads Light of Life Mission and is the founder of L3 Leadership. L3 Leadership provides training and mentorship to leaders in all stages of their leadership journey. So whether you lead a team, a church, a business, or you're just trying to lead yourself well, this podcast is for you. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Doug Smith. Well, Doug, thanks so much for joining us today, man. I really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, honored to be here. I've watched your leadership from a distance for a long time and see the work you're doing and admired it, so it's an honor.
Now, that's a short line you're standing in there.
Yeah. Hey, well, it's an honor to be one of the short. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and just really appreciate all you're doing, working with ministries here in Pittsburgh. You have your own leadership group, L3 Leadership.
Yep.
You bring in conferences. I know you do podcasts. Man, the last time I saw you, I walked in. I don't know if you remember this, and I apologize. If I didn't apologize then, I apologize now. I was speaking at Man Up and walked in on your podcast with Tomlin. So I thought, oh, man.
Oh, that's great.
Why did I open it?
Some people are, right, so now you guys should interview them together. Yeah.
You know, leadership, I know it's your heartbeat and it's your passion. And I love that you not only talk about leadership, you do leadership, and you bring leaders in that are just seasoned. And so let's just start with a question. And your experience, the people you bring in, your research, your interaction, describe what is, when we talk about leadership all the time, what is leadership? How would you elevator definition of leadership?
Yeah, this is funny. When I was looking over your questions, the first person that came to mind was our good friend Tunch Oken. I interviewed Tunch. Tunch was one of my first interviews. I want to say he was like episode 13. Mm-hmm. And I asked him something similar, and he said, Dougie, I don't know that I could define leadership for you, but I know it when I see it. And I'm like, of course, Tunch drops like this proverb. It's so simple, but so profound. And while that's not a definition, I do know leadership when I see it. And for me, I would be a disciple of John Maxwell. He's the one that really influenced and really motivated me as an 18-year-old to get into this space. And he defines leadership as leadership being influence. And so I think that's why most people can be leaders. And I view it as a leader, someone that can influence a person or a group of people to go somewhere that they couldn't go on their own and takes them to it on a journey. And so that would be my basic definition of.
What's Maxwell say? If you think you're leading and no one's following, you're just out taking a walk. I think
that's right. Yeah.
Well, Tunch would be a guy who's a leader. Before I came to this area, I worked with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so worked with a lot of athletes. And we would have them come in to speak to our schools and different things. And, man, they needed to be late. They would not have much to say. And we should have done some better vetting. That's what I learned. So I came here, and there's this guy, Tunch Oken. You got to get him to. So the first thing he did was a father-son evening. And he's first to be there. He's last to leave. He's interacting with guys all the time. And, there's something you can't teach about that. So that's another question I want to ask you here in a second. Tom Landry, who you probably maybe have heard, he was a Dallas Cowboy coach for years and years and years. And he said something, a similar definition that you just said. He said, as a coach, leadership is motivating men to do what they don't want to do in order to achieve the goals they want to achieve. I always love that.
That's good.
Motivating people is challenging, but like Tunch said, you know a leader when you see it. So here's a question I always love to ask.
Yeah.
are you a born leader, or do you learn to be a leader, or is there like a little of both in that?
Yeah, I think personally, I would say a little bit of both. I would say that I lean more on the learn side. Although when you say that, my leadership journey is interesting. I basically in 8th grade, I'd given my life to Christ and felt called to go into ministry actually. But at the same time,
8th grade.
8th grade. And at the same time, my mom got a rare nerve disease in her legs, ended up in a wheelchair and in bed most of the time. My dad had to work 2 jobs. So I went from having like a normal family life to no family life, ended up getting into drugs, falling totally away from the church, and basically became a drug dealer in my high school, stopped trying in school, and literally never thought I would do anything with my life. And my senior year of high school, my life turned around really when my mom passed away my senior year of high school. And through that, and we can talk about this later if you want to, but Christ came into my life again and really changed everything. But I had 3 different instances. One was with my assistant vice principal, and he brought us into the office, me and a buddy. We got in trouble for the 100th time. And he just said, guys, I'm sick of seeing you here, but you're leaders. And you influence people, and you can either use that for good or you can use that for bad. And you guys are using it for bad. I would challenge you to use your influence for good. And we walked away and actually laughed. And we said, can you believe that guy thinks we're leaders? But now looking back, it's like that was the first person in my life who ever recognized leadership potential in me and planted that seed that, hey, you do have influence and you are a leader. Then who would be the man who was my future father-in-law and then a youth pastor, both came around right at that pivotal age around 17, 18 years old and saw leadership potential and cast this vision for me of, hey, if you'll just be intentional with your life and follow God and pursue leadership, I think God wants to use you in a significant way. And that was really the beginning of my journey. And at the same time, that youth pastor introduced me to John Maxwell. I'll never forget it. I never knew there was such thing as personal development. And he handed me a John Maxwell CD, Standing Tall. I still remember the lesson. And I transcribed the whole lesson word for word.
Wow.
And I called him and I said, give me everything you got. And for years, I would listen to 2 or 3 hours of Maxwell every single night. And so I would say my journey, I do think I had a natural gifting, but had I not had people come around me and had resources given to me, I don't think that I could have grown into the leader I am today. And so I think, yes, you are born with innate skills, but they certainly need developed. What do you say?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I know there's a spiritual gift called leadership. I think there is something like when I see a Tunch, right? There's things that Tunch did you don't teach.
That's good.
You wouldn't say, hey, Tunch, you need to do this, this, and this. He just did them. They were innate. And so I do think there's an aspect of being born a leader, like someone saw something in you, right? Before training. Now, wherever you are in your leadership, you can always get better.
Yes.
And whoever you are, you have leadership roles you play. If you're a dad, you're a leader of your home. You're the pastor of your home. Period. The end, right? For your mom, you're leading in your home.
100%.
And I do know you can grow in particular areas of leadership, but I do think, man, there's something there. They saw it in you.
Yeah.
There's something there that you influence people. People follow you. Again, the old Maxwell thing, right? People follow. You have an innate way, a desire within, to not have a job that punches a clock.
Yeah.
But to do whatever you need to do, to get to the next step. So, man, I lean more toward born leader.
I think I'm with you because, I mean, again, my broad definition I gave you, leadership is influence. Like, it's the same thing you were saying. Like, hey, the mom who's just leading her family day to day, like that is leadership. Like those kids need led. And so again, that's where in general, the way I generally think is more broad 80,000 foot view. But I think if we were to dive into like the leaders that come to mind when we say like, who do you picture when you see a leader? I think I would agree more with you.
I think too, back to the mentor, you think of your life, right? So let's say your father-in-law wasn't there. Let's say that assistant or that principal or assistant principal had not have said, hey, you guys are leaders, at least clicking that in your mind, right? Let's say that other person, didn't say, hey, here's a Maxwell book. Tunch and I used to talk about it. I said, Tunch, how many guys out there have all the skills to be an NFL player, but aren't playing? We just thought about that. You think about that.
Yeah.
How many people in the world, let's just say the United States, They would have all the gifts of being an NFL player, the size, the speed, the whole bit. But maybe they didn't get the opportunity. Maybe like they had a tragedy in their home and they had to quit sports and work, whatever. So I think about that in leadership, right? How many people out there have this innate gift of leadership, but no one has ever said, you can do this, and here's some help in doing this, and here's an opportunity to do this. That's the other thing, right? Sometimes people have, leadership gifts, and they get in a career that they're just wheel spinning all the time. They can't get to that next step of really taking the leadership role.
This is huge. Like when I think about what would have happened, I think what the assistant principal said was true. You guys are leaders, which we did not resonate with that, but we were leading. And when I look back in my life pre-Christ, like I led tons of people into getting into drugs and there's still some people that are in bondage today. And I know I was the person that breaks my heart. And so, I think the heartbreaking thing is there's people that they're natural born leaders and they're leading, but they've never been told and had that gift awaken and be told, just like the principal said, hey, you can use this for good. Like you could use this to change the world. And I know in my leadership journey specifically, I started off in ministry. I questioned whether or not I was a leader, even when I got into this space, because different people said different things to me. And it's like, and for 10 years, I would let insecurity, am I a leader? I don't know. And my friend finally said to me, Doug, quit asking if you're a leader. The question isn't, are you a leader? The question is, what do you want to lead? And what do you want to give your life to? And that's between you and God, but give your life to something that God's calling you to and just lead. Leave all this insecurity stuff go. And and I think that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about L3 leadership and trying to reach as many people as possible. Because if I can awaken one person to change like I got changed, there's nothing better. Yeah.
Well, and that's the multiplication process. Because if you can awaken that one person, how many people are they going to impact?
Yeah.
To the way. So let's talk about this. What do you think with leaders? So Tom Brady, I saw. I'm not a huge Tom Brady.
I don't think you can be in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
But I saw him on this interview, and he was talking about. He said this. He said we were talking about all his leadership and all the stuff he does. And he was talking about the importance of failure. And he said all this NIL stuff. He said, as soon as a player is disappointed or a coach looks at them the wrong way or they don't get to play, they just go someplace else. All the portal NIL stuff. And he was talking about, when he was, again, drafted low, didn't have a lot of opportunity. His mom would always say, hey, you're going to be great. And he'd say, well, that's my mom, But when he got the chance, he was driven, right? Tunch always told the story that I think it was after his second season in the paper, the Pittsburgh paper, when we still got those, remember those paper things?
I do. I'm young enough, yeah.
In the paper, the sports writer said that the Steelers will never win a championship as long as Tunch Ilkin is playing tackle.
Wow.
And he said he read that, and his face got red, and he started burning inside. But he said, I am going to prove that guy wrong. And that's when he started doing the martial arts stuff to do the Tunch punch and the whole bit that he taught other teams. But if someone else had heard that, it would have been, the guy's right. I'm never going to do this. Or Brady, you fail and I'm going to stay down. So there's something in a leader, Tunch was a leader, something in a leader that says, I will prove that guy wrong.
Yes.
I'm not going to stay down.
Yeah, this is an interesting subject for me. A book that impacted me deeply last year was by a guy named Patrick Bet-David, businessman, and it's called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And I listen to his podcast a lot, and when he interviews people, he always asks, who are your enemies that driven you? And in Tunch's example, it's, that person that wrote that article, I will give the rest of my life to proving that person wrong. And it was interesting. I was just interviewing Clint Hurdle, the former manager of the Pirates, and I started talking. He's like, I think there's some people that does motivate them. Enemies. But, and I'm driven like that. Like I can think back to people who said things to me and it's like, okay, I'll show you. So, but this whole thing about failure, I think is huge though, because we don't learn anything from our successes. We learn from failure. Like when I think back to the pivotal moments in my life, every single one of them that took me to the next level of growth was built on catastrophic failure. And, you know, and I just love that. And I think as leaders, I've been really inspired by Clint Hurdle. He started doing these posts every Friday on Instagram called Friday Fails. And hey, here's where I failed this week. And what are most leaders posting? They're posting clips from a podcast saying how awesome of leaders they were and look what they built. And like, it doesn't actually paint a realistic picture. We fail every single day. And I think as leaders, we need to be more open to sharing and being authentic with our failures to show people the path of like, you have to go through the failure to get to where you want to go.
I'm going to start that. No lack of content.
Yeah, you should. Friday Fails. Let's go. Let's make it a thing.
Before podcasts were podcasts. We had a radio program here, and I would interview people, would do conversations. And so I did a conversation with Hurdle. And so, you know, and you know this because you're a podcaster, you try to, you prepare the best you can, but sometimes you're on the edge, right? And so Hurdle said, yeah, I do this morning Devo every morning. It wasn't Friday Fails, it was Devo every morning, and put a scripture in it. And I said, yeah, those are great. He said, what scripture did I do today? Oh, my gosh.
So that's awesome.
I just stuttered around, and he started laughing, and then he gave me, but he, like,
You guys edit that out?
no, that was live radio.
Oh, okay, wow, that's so funny. Oh, man.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
Friday Fails. All right. I'm going to borrow that from, I'll give you the credit or Hurdle the credit.
Yeah, I give credit where credit's due.
So failure teaches us so much. There was a guy, Doug, that used to tell me, he said, I can always tell a person if they're in their 50s or 60s, if they've never had a really hard stretch, because something happens at that point in their life and they like collapse. And it's like, you're 50 or 60, you got to be able to handle that now, but you've never learned in that.
Yeah.
And so, man, failure's a great teacher.
When you say it's interesting, we were talking earlier about you have a passion for leading families and marriages and kids. And I'm a father now. And I think back to how you're talking about, like, I feel like having the childhood that I did, all the trauma that I saw and experienced, like, it has given me a chip on my shoulder. And I feel like I have a different drive than had I not experienced those things. Mm-hmm. But now as a parent leading my family team, and we have 5 kids, like, I don't want them to have to go through anything that I did, but it's like, man, how can I lead? I'd be interested in your insight on this. Mm-hmm. Like, how can I lead my kids in a way that, yes, like, they may not have to go through everything that I went through, but they go through enough challenges. We let them fail enough that they end up, not being 15 or crumbling. It's like they get it. Do you have any thoughts there?
That's a great question. And what we wanted our kids, we didn't want our kids to fail. We wanted to allow them to fail. That's inevitable. And not always be there to fix their problem. It's not the teacher's fault that you failed that test, And one of our daughters would say, "Oh, this teacher." I said, "Let's just get in the car. Let's go talk to him right now. Man, I can't believe I'm paying taxes, and such a terrible teacher. Let's just go talk." Oh, no. But to let them fail. This is interesting. I just did a podcast with a lady who specializes in counseling couples where it's usually the guy, not always, the guy is involved in porn. So porn is blowing up these marriages. And so she said, one of the issues, and so we're talking about this, and I was like, how are you going to tie this thing in? And she said, one of the issues that parents need to do is let their children fail. Now, again, it's not like putting them off the cliff and they're going to jump off. You're going to keep them from jumping off a cliff, but normal opportunities to fail. And I'm thinking, how does this work into this porn conversation?
That's how I'm wondering. Yeah. I'm like, where do you take us, Ron? Yeah.
And then she said, you see, porn is not the problem, it's the solution. Porn is degrading, it's terrible, it's exploitation, it's all those things. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But it's the solution to a deeper issue that we're really not satisfied with God. And it becomes a coping mechanism. in our life. And we could put any sin there, right?
Sure.
Greed, materialism is not the problem, it's the solution to our greed. But she said when kids, they never are able to fail, their parents are always, talking to the coach because they don't have enough playing time. They fail a test, they're in fixing it. Again, never able to experience this. I failed. It's my fault. Yeah. I'm not a failure, but I failed, and I got to fix this. I got to do better the next time. How am I going to learn from this? She said, when those kids get into college, and then you're going to fail at some point. Yeah. She said, they don't know what to do, and so you run to something comfortable. And she said, in her counseling, she's seen so many people go to porn because they never learned to deal with.
I would have never put that together.
Wow, how did you tie that up? But I think there's some truth to that.
Drinking, drugs, name it.
Yeah. I run to something that comforts me.
Yeah.
And you can, again, you can do all the porn stuff. I'm tired and lonely and bored and whatever.
Yeah.
But
what's the deeper issue?
Yeah. What's the deeper issue?
Yeah.
So, with leadership, I think, when a person fails, we were talking earlier, I came here to first the church as an associate. The senior pastor left, and we plummeted. We went from like 500 to 350. I grew it. I had church growth gifts, man. I grew it from 500 to 350.
Oh man,
that was before I preached. Then it got crazy, but early on, it was like week to week, and it was like a fire. And I realized early on that this is God's church. It's not mine. I have a responsibility here. But I just think about the things I learned then, because it wasn't the last time we had a challenge in leadership.
Yeah.
You're always going to have another challenge. So anyway, I think failure. So I like the hurdle thing, Friday failures, because we live in a world where it's like social media. It's my best phase. It's my best day.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, and we always joke, Maxwell always said this thing that the reality is leadership sucks. Like, you've been in leadership long enough, and he always says there's no such thing as 2 easy consecutive days in a leader's life. And if you've when you're in your 20s and you see all these videos, it's like, oh, if I could just be a leader and have a C-suite and be in the corner and lead an organization, it'd be so cool. It's like, not really.
Yeah.
It's not that cool. Like, it's great to make a big impact, but much more responsibility, and a lot comes with it. There's a huge price to be paid. And just recognize, like, there's going to be things that you fail at every single day. And I think the more we can share that, the more impact we'll make with this generation for sure.
I'll never forget sitting in another staff person's office, and there was a big issue here at our church. And I had been talking about it with a lot of people and stuff. And this guy, who was like my right-hand man, he said, man, you have some big decisions to make. And I wanted him to say, we have some big decisions. But I realized that, yeah, I do. Now, we have elders and everything, and no one's alone. But at the end of the day, I always want to say, if we fail, it's on me.
Yeah.
If we win, you guys got it.
Yeah.
Because I felt that,
Yeah.
When you fail, when I didn't do something well.
Yeah.
And so, like Maxwell says, there's no 2 consecutive days, and it's going to be some rough times in there.
Yeah, when we fail, let's admit it too, right?
Yeah.
Leaders are so easy to push off. They're like, oh, people know you failed. So I was listening to someone the other day, and they're like, I will only follow a leader who's willing to admit they were wrong, willing to admit they didn't make the right. And I think we as leaders need to be much more vulnerable and owning our failure as well and taking responsible for it.
For sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just shove it down and hope that people don't notice, and they always do.
They somehow always
You'll lose credibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've been around some great leaders. You lead, so you have the experience. You know what it looks like. You are a leader. You've interviewed some great guys. You have top-notch people coming into L3 training and conferences. As you and it's always fun with those conferences because you get to see the people when they're not on stage,
yes.
right? That's when you see the real person when they're not on stage. That's what I always loved about Tunch and others, because he was the same guy sitting, having a cup of coffee as he was when he was on the stage. Another guy, I got to meet a real hero of mine, a mentor of mine from afar, Chuck Swindoll.
Yeah.
And had lunch with him a few times. And I thought, yeah, you're the same guy that I read, and you're the same guy when you're talking as you are here at lunch. And there's just something so authentic, attractive about that.
Yeah.
So you see all these people, and you get to see them up close, and you get to interact with them. What would you say if you could 3, 5? I don't care how many you have, but what are the characteristics? Like, what are the echoes of, man, that's a characteristic of a leader?
Yeah. For me, the ones that come to mind off the top of my head is one is authentic, just like you're talking about. Like Clint Hurdle for me is authenticity. So they're the same person they are when you interview them as they are behind the scenes. They're open about their failures. So authenticity. 2 is character. So I would say character development is the most important. And so the leaders that I look up to and admire most, and even, I made this commitment on the front end when I started L3, like I never want to have a leader on whose marriage is falling, right? Like I want people who are living the real deal. And so character is huge. I think they care about people. So, most people start with a heart for wanting to help people, wanting to make their lives better. So for me, that's foundational for what I look for in leaders. Of even if they're leading an organization, like, do you want the people in your organization's lives to be better as a result of your leadership? So there's a few things. They make things happen, right? Without leaders, nothing would get done. Nothing happens without prayer, money, and leadership. And so that's, going back to our original definition, we take people to places they couldn't go on their own. And so they usually have large visions of something they want to do, but want to do with a group of people. And they're able to inspire and articulate a vision in a way that brings everyone around and use different people's gifts and accomplish whatever God's called them to do. And so those are some of the things that come to mind off the top of my head.
Authenticity, character, care for other people, make things happen.
Yeah.
And I love the other thing you said. A leader doesn't really care who gets the credit. Now, again, we all got an ego.
Right.
Sometimes we say, hey, it wouldn't have happened unless I was a part of that, right?
Sure.
But God is good at humbling us.
Yes, that's what God usually gives us spouses. Yes. We're not that good.
But a leader doesn't really care who gets the credit as long, and would love to give other people credit as long as the ball's moving, as long as we're moving forward.
Yes.
I think that is so critical in leadership.
Yeah, you have to get people to deliver the goods. I always tell young leaders, like, your goal in an organization is to become the obvious choice, and you become the obvious choice by delivering the goods of whatever you're supposed to be doing. And so, execution is key. If you can't execute, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
I think you didn't ask me, but I would add, and you said this, I'll just put the name team building, right? So you're building a team. Because if you're not building a team, this thing is just as small as you are. If you're building a team, man, this thing gets this really big. That's great. That's great. I love that. Again, authenticity, character, care, make things happen, building a team. Great stuff. You're a young leader.
Ish.
I'll
be 40 in May. I don't mind. I do it myself. Yeah.
Your life is almost over. Have you visited the funeral home to make
Well, I was a few years ago. Our executive director hosted a meeting for young leaders in the organization, and I wasn't invited. And when I heard about it, I'm like, what? Like, I'm always invited to the emerging leader meetings. And so I'm like, why wasn't I invited? He's like, 35 and under, man. I had a midlife crisis at that moment, but
it happens. I've been here long, and I've been in leadership long enough to be the youngest leader. I feel pretty good about that, and then not be the youngest leader, and it's a whole different feel. I think biblical leadership is biblical leadership, right? It doesn't change. So these things, authenticity, character, care, these really, all good leadership principles are first biblical principles.
Yep.
And we do live in a different culture. Do you think any of those things you mentioned? So you're 40. You just brought in a guy, Horst Schultz.
Yeah.
84 years old. Tremendous leader. Do you think some of the things Schultz did, when I read his book and some of the things he said, do you think some of those things would fly today? Do you see anything happening, like leaders and influence and what people will move with and toward?
I love it, to be honest with you. So, like, even when he came in, now he'll say, like, generationally, when he talks, there's things that he says, I'm like, he said a few things at the conference, I'm like, okay. I don't know if I would have said it that way, but it's just who he is. But as far as the way he led, at the end of the day, like, I do feel like we have a generation that, like, doesn't want standards and doesn't want a high bar of excellence. And I think you're seeing that everywhere in service industries. It's like, I go to restaurants and sometimes I'm just like, really? Like,
Yeah.
has anyone taught you anything? And again, I only say that because I'm so grateful for the people in my life who came and raised the bar. And so for me, you know, he shared how he made this list, and I'm going to forget how many. They had like 20 core values, and he would print these laminated cards every single day and literally make everyone huddle, and he'd go over a core value every single day, and they'd have to do something, and just huge high standards. And that inspired so many leaders at our conference. We had a guy that Henny Jewelers, I don't know if you know John, he went and he started doing that with his whole industry. And so for me, when I think about Horst and just excellence wins, I think that's desperately needed in our culture. I don't know if that's specifically what you were talking about, but I think we desperately need to raise the leadership bar in our culture today.
So talk to the 50-year-old leader, right? So 10 years older than you, and coach them up on how to lead a 25 or 30-year-old. Is there something different? Is it more relational? Is it more transactional? I mean, what do they need? Do they not need to do anything different? You just lead, or no, we have to sit back and consciously think about, okay, this is a different time. People raise different ways with our culture, and we need to lead differently. How would you coach that 50-year-old leader?
Yeah, I can only speak from the way I've led and, you know, my experience with that. I don't even know if they're the next generation for me or if I'm a millennial. But for me, yeah, everything goes back to relationships. And even when we were talking about authenticity, I think the next generation craves authenticity more than anything. And so if they're seeing a leader who's not authentic, who's not sharing, who's not open, who doesn't own his or her failures, then I think you're going to lose all influence and all credibility. But I would also say, like, part of the reason I started L3 and I bring in seasoned leaders is the next generation desperately needs mentored and desperately wants to be mentored by that generation. And the gap I see is they don't know how to ask for it. They're afraid often. An older generation is afraid of the younger generation. I don't know how to connect with them, but they desperately need each other. And these people have so much to offer because, you know, a mentor told me the mistake my generation makes is all of our mentors are 1 year older than us, right? Like, they really haven't lived their lives, had the experience, had the failure to really give you the lessons that are going to take you to the finish line, which is a whole other thing. So I would spend a lot of time relationally. I would gather, if you lead an organization, I would gather the young leaders together and be open and vulnerable. Hey guys, I'm 50 years old. I don't know about your generation. I love your generation. I see so much potential in your generation, and I want to do everything I can to lead you well and help you mature, grow, and develop. How can I do that? And take feedback. I think a lot of older leaders aren't necessarily teachable, but I think feedback is such a gift. And if you'll ask, they'll answer.
Yeah.
If you listen. Again, Andy, listening. If you don't listen to people when they give you feedback, soon you'll be surrounded with people who have nothing to say.
Right. That's a great point. Well, I think that's a great point all the way around. And I asked that question in a way that I hate to interact with questions stereotypically, right? So in the older generation, the younger generation, there are people who are going to work their tails off. They're going to get things done. They have back to leadership. They have a personal drive. You know, they're a college kid, and it's May, and they already know what they're going to be doing this summer, right?
Yeah.
And then others are going to graduate, and like my generation as well, and way ahead of yours. You know, some got home and had no idea what they were going to do during the summer in their college years. So maybe it's not so much. I did an interview with a podcast with Walt Mueller from a Center for Parent Youth Understanding. And I said, well, just give me like a thumbnail description of every generation, and, you know, start with the boomers and then the Xers and all. Just go all the way down. And so he did it, and he did a great job. But he said, you know what? There's not a lot of difference, really. You know, we're people. We got the same issues.
Yep.
we may have other ways that it's temptations and screen time and distractions, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to be something different. It was something different 20 years ago. It's going to be something different 20 years from now.
When you're saying that, I guess this came up in my heart. Dave Ramsey always says, the next generation, there's two types, awesome and suck. Right? Like there's people that are awesome, they're going to be rock stars. But on that side, I would say, and I do feel like this has been a generational shift. When we talk about the epidemic of fatherlessness in our country, I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And when you look at the ramifications of that. And so I would say that next generation, they need fathered and they need mothered a lot of times. And is that our job in the workforce? Not necessarily, but going back to the men and women who poured into my life that were in positions of leadership in our city that didn't have to, had they not done that, I'm not standing here today. I'm not working at Light of Life. I'm much more likely to be a client at Light of Life, walking through our doors in need. And so I would really challenge leaders like, who can you mother and father in an appropriate way and really raise up that you'll look back and say, wow, I can't believe they started there when they were 20. They were just this little punk. But now look at them now. You may be raising up your successor. You never know.
You never know. I just think of when I came here, one guy I really looked up to was a guy named Jim Leckie. I don't know if you remember him, but he led a family ministry here. He got a bunch of pastors together, and he said, "Guys, we got to talk about the family and in your churches." And he said, "Let's start with marriage." And so he brought some national figures in, the marriage experts, and we had some great time. And we signed this contract that before anyone would be married at our church, they had to go through 6 weeks of premarital counseling. We still did that today. We still do that today. And I was sitting in there. I was working on my doctorate at the time, and I hadn't decided on a dissertation. And I thought, man, marriage, that'd be pretty interesting to do. And if we could teach this at our church, that's a good thing. Yeah. And so I just think about Leckie, who never thought of that, but he influenced me just by being around him with marriage and really wanting to pour into that. So he probably didn't even know that. He's with the Lord now, but it's just amazing. I was just thinking, when leaders don't invest in the next generation, man, we lose so many resources.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are you intentionally doing to seek that? It's so important.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So we've kind of already said this, but let's just put another definition to it. Servant leadership. What's servant leadership?
Yeah, for me, I just think life is not about you. And so it should be all about others. I think that's the example that Christ gave us. And so it's you laying down your life, your wants, your rights, your everything in order to make the lives of others better. And so every decision you make as a leader organizationally in your family should all be about the other people. It's all about the people. It's been the recurring thing we've been talking about. It's all about people. And for me, the true litmus test at the end of a leader's life is, who did you impact? We've recently seen the last two of our heroes, Tunch and Wolf, and to go to their memorial services and just hear the impact person over person or person. They were truly, I work at Light of Life. They served for over 35 years. Those two men used their platform, their finances, everything they had in leadership to benefit the least of these, so to speak, in the city of Pittsburgh. That is servant leadership. And they are the true models of it for me. And they certainly inspire me in their legacy does today. Yeah.
One of the things I think about when I think of both of those guys, they did so many things up front, in the public, emceeing this or emceeing that, the radio, the whole bit. But those guys were behind the scenes men as well. So there was a guy that came to our church. Craig spoke at something. We did an interview thing with him, and this guy came up and said, I met Craig Wolfley once, years ago. I'd like to meet him. So I said, yeah, come on over, man. I'll introduce you. So he talks to Craig, and Craig said, oh, yeah, I remember meeting you, the whole bit. A conversation. Some months later, that guy passed away. So his daughter reached out to me and said, hey, my dad thought so much of Craig. Would you just tell Craig that my dad passed away? Long story short, Craig said, oh, thanks for telling me. Went to the viewing, went to the funeral, and interacted with that family at a level that he didn't have to.
Yeah.
I don't know that he knew the guy that well, but that was who he was.
Yes.
And I just thought, man, that's servant leadership. No one saw that.
Yeah.
And it took time, and there was sacrifice. He had to sacrifice something else. Busy guy, but he was willing to do that when no one else. And Tunch was the same way.
I had Tunch. So, and again, it's not like I was best friends with Tunch, but at the mission, he every time I had a kid, I got a video from Tunch saying, Dougie, I'm so happy, or a call. I was just watching a video the other day of him leaving me that. My sister in 2019 passed away of a heroin overdose. Tunch was the first person to call me and leave a voicemail. He came to the viewing. My family couldn't believe it. And again, that's who those guys are. And don't, as leaders, servant leadership, so much more, like, you could be surprised. Just be where your feet are. That's what Clint Hurdle always says, and Inspire Me. He said, hey, when you're a leader, people are going to want your time. He said, when I'm at the gas station pumping gas as a Pirates manager, people wanted to come up to me and give me a lineup. So I let them give me a lineup. They wanted to tell me how bad what I should have done differently last night. So I let them, just love people. And again, here at Twins Pass, how many years ago, and I'm still watching videos and listening to a voicemail of him just to hear the guy's voice and saying, wow, this guy took time to call me in a time of need when, it was the last thing he probably needed to do.
Yeah. The impact all leaders make on your life is just so significant. And I think that goes back to the Maxwell thing. If you're a leader, there's going to be some tough stretches. There's going to be some hard times. No days like another one, which I think as leaders we thrive on, right? Because that's fun. And stress is, if you're a leader, you like to work through that, right? Because you want to fix this thing. You want to get the people around to work through it together. But at the end of the day, it's doing the things that no one else sees.
Yeah.
And man, that's where real leadership takes place. And that true leader is also doing that in the home.
Yes.
Because your 5 kids, they don't care what you did today.
Yep.
They care what you do tonight, when you're around them.
Yeah.
And I see so many guys, man, they're dynamic as a leader of a company, but their marriage and family's falling apart. And you say, time out. That's not holistic leadership.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this. So in my early 20s, I'll never forget, I was working at Victory Family Church. John Nuzzo, I don't know if you're close to him or not, but
good guy.
He said, guys, I think about 2% of Christian leaders make it to their finish line doing what God called them to do with their families intact. 2%. Now, again, I don't know that there's a data study behind that, but I'm sure it's not much higher of a percentage if it is. And so that always challenged me. And where I think so many leaders miss it is they lead in isolation. I remember hearing Henry Cloud say that 80% of CEOs that he had worked with didn't have one single person in their life that they could confide in. Not one. And so community became very big for me, which is why we do mastermind groups. And, we were talking earlier, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I started a group, I call it a pastormind. And I just grabbed that there's 13 of us. I think 9 or 10 of them are all local lead pastors who just took over. And 3 of them are, leading nonprofits like Light of Life. And the vision for this that we cast is every leader needs a place where they're fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. So fully known, hey, if I'm struggling in my marriage or with my kids, I can openly share that. Why? Because I'm fully loved. I know that people are going to love me and they couldn't care less what I'm doing because they couldn't care more. And then lastly, fully challenged. Sometimes, like you're saying, if someone's marriage is falling apart and they're crushing it in ministry, they literally need slapped in the face. And it's bro, what's wrong? You're going to lose everything. And again, to see these guys come together and be fully known, loved, and challenged. And basically the vision is, guys, I want to be 60s, 70s, handing our baton off to the next generation, looking back saying our families are intact, our kids are all loving and serving God. Nothing's more important, but I don't think that can happen if you're living in isolation and not in community.
Yeah. That's so great. We keep going back to Tunch, and I was thinking about that, and you have a lot of associates, you have a lot of associations, but a good friend that you can do those things with on a deep personal level, man, I think, if you get a handful of those, you're a fortunate person. And I was thinking of going through a tough stretch a few years ago. And if there hadn't been one guy in my life, I don't think I wouldn't have made it. But he was always there to challenge me. And it wasn't always, hey, this is a pity party. You're right. It's like, no, you shouldn't be thinking like that. I got to tell a quick story. So Tunch and I have knew each other for many, many, many years, and kind of grew up here at the church together. And we in 2010 we had this radio ministry here in Pittsburgh, The Journey, for years on Word FM. And 2010 we went national. We went through, I think, 12 or 16 stations across the country. So I'll never forget. Tunch came to me and said, "Let me just tell you this: if I ever sense you getting a big head over this, I will knock it off your shoulders. Don't ever forget that."
That's so beautiful, man.
And it was just, we had that relationship. And then I would read that he made the Pittsburgh All 50-year team. Oh man, look at you! You're in the highlight again. So we had a great relationship. But there was an aspect that there was a humility that was brought on by that we're not big stuff. We're not bigger than we think we are, and we got other people making sure we don't get to that point in our life. You got to have people challenging you.
Yeah, I'm curious when you, and I don't know if it was Tunch or not, but you mentioned that one person. It's like, man, if it weren't for that person, and I'm curious though, like for me, like that group is that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But what did that look like? I mean, you were a pastor of a church, influential church, thousands of people probably wanting to spend time with you. Easily could have been isolation. Like, I'm assuming that relationship didn't happen just lackadaisically or by accident. Like, what did you guys do intentionally to form that? Like, did you try to check in with each other every week? I'm just curious because I always want to know how people...
That relationship started probably 25 years ago, and there were 3 of us who met in what we always call accountability groups.
Yeah.
And so we met every other week, I think, or once a month, I can't remember, and we would meet, Eden Park or Bob Evans or someplace, and we would just check in with each other, see how each other's going. We would text each other along the way. At some point, for whatever reason, one guy kind of fell off, and so he and I kept meeting regularly. And we it's interesting. Our families didn't go out and hang out together, but anytime I needed to talk to him or he needed to talk to me, here's a text. Hey, let's get together.
Okay.
And work through it. And so it just became a deep friendship. It wasn't like, okay, we're in accountability, so we're going to meet this day and we're going to ask these questions. Tunch and I used to talk about that too. Accountability groups, when you're in an accountability group, and yours are going to be different, right?
Yeah.
The ones you do, but it's like, okay, this guy's having trouble with something. I'm going to dog on him, but I'm next, and I'm having trouble with the same thing. And so Tunch and I used to say, no one even holds anyone accountable in the accountability groups. But it's that friendship. It's that deep friendship that says...
It's not about accountability. The accountability comes to being fully known and fully loved, and being, whether it's in that group setting or me calling you after and saying like, hey, I don't feel comfortable sharing this with everyone, but like, I mentor told me, he said, Doug, when you mess up or when you're going through a struggle, you don't have to tell everyone, but you do have to tell someone. Yeah. And, you have to choose that. But again, what I'm hearing from you is like, that didn't happen by accident. It was intentional pursuit of that. And so as leaders are listening to this, it's like, if you don't have that, whether it's a single person, whether it's a group of people, I can't challenge you enough to find that as soon as you got to have it.
I got a couple other guys that even if we don't talk with each other for a month or 6 weeks, when we call or text, it's like we were picking up right, where we started, and you never have to worry about that relationship. That's the other thing, right? Because say anything you want to say, and you're not worried about losing the relationship. Yep. You're just walking through this thing together.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
So we're going to wrap this up. I want you to pray for men and women who are leaders in business, in church. But before you do that, you can find your stuff at
L3leadership.org,
okay.
rightoflife.org, or just look up Doug Smith. Life.com, any of those.
Okay.
You'll find me. I'm not hard to find. I post on social every day, try to add value to people. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And so you got the leadership group, Light of Life, your own, you got the podcast. But yeah, people, what's the podcast name?
Yeah, the L3 Leadership Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, 425 episodes in. Where are you at? You, with your radio show, you have to be in the thousands.
Well, we would have been, but they weren't called podcasts back then.
Well, I would consider them a podcast. Would you have any idea how many shows you've done?
Yeah, there'd be a bunch. There'd be a bunch. We're mounting them up since we regrouped and restarted. But yeah, there'd be a ton of them.
Yeah.
They're captured someplace. They're captured someplace. In fact, one I did radio programs with Tunch, and the content was so good. I think we did 12 sessions, 2 series of 12, each 12 sessions long. And so we just did a retro podcast with Tunch.
Oh, wow.
Putting that together. I think we did that last summer. It was a blast. And we had so much results. The cool part about that was I had people come up and say, I just moved into Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. I hear this name Tunch all the time, but I got to meet him through those podcasts. And we had all his kids introduce. One of his kids introduced each episode, so that was
well. And the power of this platform. If anyone's listening to this and wants to start a podcast, I mean, you would know this. Like, we just were at Craig Wolfley's memorial service together, and you had the opportunity to speak to honor his life. And the fact that you had recorded conversations, and I thought it was so beautiful that you played Craig Wolfley talking about grace and talking about God. I mean, what great gift like that. The family can have that forever, and so can everyone that know them. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done, the content you put on.
Man, I was so privileged to talk to Craig, and we were so thankful we got that. And he just went so quickly. Yeah. But we had so much of what he says has been recorded. But man, talking about Christ, he was tender.
Yeah.
For Christ. And what a great guy. What a great guy. Well, Doug, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it so much. We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, and you're next. I'm interviewing you for the podcast, and I look forward to
Very cool.
that.
Pray for us.
Right. Father, in the name of Jesus, Lord, I just thank you for Ron. I thank you for this ministry. I thank you for this podcast. And Lord, I just pray for everyone listening, Lord. I pray that what we just said impacted them, Father, whether it was something that we said or something you whispered to them just as they were listening, Father. And Lord, I just pray for leaders. Lord, we just prayed about, it's all about people, Father. No matter how old you are, what season of leadership you're in, where you're working, it's all about others in the kingdom of God and being servant leaders. And so I pray for every leader that you would develop them, Father, as quickly and as solidly as you can in their life, Father, to be the leaders you've called them to be. And I pray that you would make a big impact in and through their lives. And I thank you for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks so much, Doug. Appreciate it.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
You bet.
Well, as you've heard today, leadership isn't just a skill, it's a calling. And as you heard today, it often involves walking through failure and disappointment and challenge. But through it all, God is shaping us, refining our character, deepening our dependence on Him, and preparing us to serve others with humility and strength. So whether you lead a church, whether you lead in the marketplace, in your home, remember, true leadership reflects the heart of Jesus. A servant first, a shepherd always. Keep showing up, keep trusting, and let your leadership be the light that points others to something greater. If this episode encouraged you, share it with someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe so you can never miss one of these conversations. So until next time, stay grounded and keep following hard after Jesus. I want to thank our podcast team for making this episode possible. Our executive director is Jen Booth. Ryan Jorgen produces each podcast. Mark James delivers each podcast right to you. Laura Crane promotes each podcast through social media. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Again, thanks so much for joining us today on the Living Grounded podcast.